Welcome to the Investor Empowerment Series radio show, empowering your real estate investing with techniques, opportunities, and information, minus the BS and sales pitches. Now, please welcome the host of the Investor Empowerment Series, Joe Mueller, from the Tough as Nails Investment Syndicate. Joe Mueller.
Welcome today. We've got Jack Baczek. Sorry, I almost screwed it up already. We just started. We got Jack Baczek on the phone here from Marvel Equity on today's podcast. This is the Investor Empowerment Radio Show, episode number 23. I met Jack at a meetup. Man, I talk about meetups all the time. I don't know if these listeners are going to get tired of it ever. But I met Jack at a meetup probably about a month ago. We didn't really chat that much the first time, and then last week we discussed a little more openly as a group of what everyone's into, and come to find out that Jack is a mobile home park investor. And man, I am totally curious to hear how this works. So let's get started. Jack, thank you again for taking the time coming on the podcast with me today. And let's hear a little bit more about you and how you got started.
Hey, Joe. Thanks a lot for having me on, and I appreciate you guys putting meetups on. I think the last one, Dan was talking about how one of the things when you're doing real estate investing is you kind of miss that water cooler talk. So that's a lot of fun going there and hearing about what everyone's doing, because, you know, real estate, it's kind of like the more you know about different things, it's useful. So that way everything you look at doesn't look like a nail when you only have a hammer, and you can figure out how to maneuver things differently. So I really appreciate you guys putting those on. And
absolutely.
I've really enjoyed going there.
That's what it's all about, man. You just hit the nail on the head. Not to use another analogy, but that's what it's all about.
There we go, yeah. So I started getting into real estate investing about 8 years ago. I started doing a lot of studying. I guess even before that, my parents had a handful of rentals, and even when I was younger, they had a 12-unit apartment building. So I kind of grew up with a little bit of knowledge, knowing that, you know, there's some type of benefit to owning real estate. I got to hang out with my dad. We went to go make repairs, which I dreaded to this day, and I hate doing any repairs myself. I think probably from those early childhood years.
I don't want to interrupt you, but that's awesome that you're saying that, because everyone that knows me knows that I drag my two little kids around with me all the time to go to these houses, and I'm not always fixing stuff, but I'm making lists, or checking work that's been completed, or just checking on the properties. Sure. Sometimes we make GoPro videos because I'm putting all that stuff on YouTube. And I hate to say this and record it on a podcast, because I have this vision of them growing up to be these little real estate moguls, but they freaking hate it, man. They hate it. They're like, no, we don't want to go look at any houses. And I'm like, come on, dudes, we got to do this. This is how you make money. I'm like, come on, this is what pays the bills. And they're like, no, please, Daddy, please. I'm like, okay. And then I take them anyway. So anyway, go. I apologize for interrupting you, but I love that story. How your dad, your parents were involved in it. They took you with, they exposed you to it, and now look where you're at. So I think that's awesome. So please continue.
And ironically, I now own a washer and dryer, a couple of them that have and I still go to that property myself. I've taken my daughter there a couple times. She's young. She's only 19 months, but. So I'm just going to watch and kind of see her reaction about things if she dreads doing it, but I'm not going to make her try and do some of these silly toilet repairs, and I'm embarrassed. Like, that's a really basic thing, and I can't do it. So, but, and then I guess it was a different mentality I grew up with, because, my parents said, or at least my dad, that you needed to do everything yourself, otherwise you weren't going to make any money. I just thought that's ludicrous, because, I don't want to do that, so I don't want to go into this being miserable, but it was nice getting that upbringing. And when I got a little bit older, I helped my parents out with their rentals, just kind of handling the leases and taking care of some small repairs and everything. It was great exposure.
Right.
In 2007 is kind of when I really started to think, well, maybe I should, I had a little bit of money saved up. I should try and do something. So I started looking at the market. I lived with my parents in Mount Prospect at the time. And then kind of crunching the numbers, everything around the area just didn't make sense. And, lo and behold, it ends up being a bubble, but sure. I couldn't make any deals work. So I was really sold on the concept of multifamily and getting that passive income. So I started looking in areas where properties were cheaper and the rent ratio relative to the purchase price made sense. I had a deal that I was trying to buy in Oklahoma. It was like 50 some odd apartments. or 50 units, and that one fell apart, and it was a big learning experience. I probably spent about $6 or $7 grand in due diligence costs, and I just really just felt sick to my stomach. I thought, man, there's no way I'm going to be able to succeed. I just pissed away a bunch of money.
Right.
But I kept looking, and I ended up finding it's a fractured condo deal outside of Houston. It was where we were buying 41 of the 48 condo units in a complex, and they were kind of operated as apartments. And I thought, that's great. Why don't I go ahead and, try this one? So we went ahead and we put under contract, and while it was under contract, it got hit by Hurricane Ike.
Oh, no.
That was a really big. Well, I thought, oh no, and it actually ended up being a tremendous blessing because we walked into the insurance claim and got to, get new roofs on the property and a whole bunch of other things. So I spent about a year trying to adjust that claim. So I learned a lot about insurance and that whole side of it. But it ended up being great. And what I guess I didn't know while I was doing at the time was kind of repositioning the complex. It wasn't really anything to brag about in the beginning, and then it just ended up being a really nice place. And the tenants were really friendly, and just really everyone kind of in the neighborhood appreciated us cleaning the place up, and I really loved it. At that point, it was probably a few years into it, we had almost done the whole complex, and I started dabbling in a couple other things, not real estate related, and I didn't really, I kind of started shooting a bunch of different ways, so I really started trying to scale back and figure out what do I need to do. And I thought real estate was the, kind of the thing that made the most sense. So we ended up, I actually had that property. I proposed to my wife in the office. God bless her soul. But when I moved out there, she was my girlfriend at the time, and she lived in the office with me in the back office. And that was, it's a lot of those fun things you do in the beginning that you really kind of, I guess, build character and, with trying to help out with repairs and, just doing things that I probably wouldn't do today, but I wouldn't trade them for the world because it was great to get those experiences.
Oh, that sounds awesome.
Yeah, so then we ended up moving back to Illinois around 2011, and I was trying to buy a single-family home and found a cheaper townhouse that I thought would be a great rental. So we were trying to find a house to buy to live in. That one ended up falling apart. We ended up buying this little townhouse. So we lived in it. That was in Vernon Hills, and it was a great little place. And the other thing that I really learned from that was some of my friends were buying a little bit more expensive houses, and we bought this kind of like cheap, embarrassing place. And we kept our costs low. So I'm really grateful for that because we never thought about money because our whole house payment was like with HOA and like $600 or something.
Awesome.
So
you were smart about the
years.
money instead of exploding and maximize the opportunity of pre-approval or whatever when you purchased. You kept those costs down, which I think is great, especially if you're an aspiring real estate investor because you need to have access to, capital and keep your monthly bills down in order to pay and buy more property.
Right. Because, especially when you start looking at financing and, they have to factor in, whatever debt service you have out there into whatever payment you're trying to buy on. So it's extremely important because if you come across with here's my house and here's my $3,000 a month payment, I have no money, I'm overextended on credit, I can't buy something, you can really miss out on a lot of opportunities that way.
Right.
So it was great, and we lived there for a couple of years, and then we kind of had the itch to move back to Texas. And I thought, that's going to be great. We ended up renting that townhouse. I think it's like $1,200 or $1,250 a month, so it was like $500 or $600 extra dollars a month that we had now.
Oh, okay.
And
awesome.
we upgraded this time, Joe. We went into one of the units there, and so we didn't have to live in the back of the office.
Awesome. I bet your wife appreciated that a little bit.
Yeah, and we really overdid it, for the finishes, but it was okay because we were living there, and I knew we had we lived in the office for a long time. So there, as I said, there's a fractured condo deal, 41 to 48 units. There was a guy in there who owned 5 of the units, and he was treating them as rentals, and it was always a hard time because his tenants weren't properly screened, and he was giving us a hard time. And I thought, man, we want to buy this, and so we ended up starting to talk with the guy, and we worked out a deal, and we bought 5 of his units. So now we owned all but 2 of the units in the complex, and it was great because everything was already there. We had to upgrade them all, but the management was just so simple since I had an on-site manager at the time.
Uh-huh.
Then I thought, what's next? I started doing some direct mail marketing on properties, and I said, I'm either going to try and find an apartment complex or a mobile home park. I had kind of been looking at mobile home parks for a year and kind of learning about them and studying the specifics about them. I could just never wrap my head around them because I thought, sometimes these properties sell for, say, like $20,000 a pad versus an apartment that you're selling for, 20, $30K a door. And you're actually getting something. You have some brick and mortar structure with a mobile home park with the tenant owning their own home. What are you actually buying? So I couldn't grasp my head around it. But so I ended up checking out a bunch of apartment buildings and a mobile home park.
Is this all in Texas still, or are you all over the U.S.? Okay.
I took pretty much like an hour radius around Texas,
okay.
Around where our existing property was, and I was trying to find that area. So we found a small park, and it was the worst park in the world. It was 20 spaces. Everything in the world was wrong with it, and it was tremendous, turnaround property. And my manager, I asked her, I said, do you want to stick with me if we do this, because I don't really know what to expect. And she said, I think you're crazy, but I'll stay with you. So we spent about a year, and that was kind of where I learned a lot of these specifics about mobile home parks and kind of the nature of the business and bringing in homes and kind of, the different business models that are out there. You can sometimes own the homes, you can rent them, lease to own, sell them off, and just have the people renting the lot. And the part of the business that I like the most was when the tenants own their own home, because they're a stakeholder in your property, and they typically value their home more. They take care of it better because they own it now instead of you renting the home to them. And I loved it. And just the nice thing too is with that business model, your expense structure is lower. Where depending on who pays the utilities, you might be operating at a 30 or 40% expense ratio. Versus like an apartment where you might be at 50% or 60%. So,
sure.
I really love that about it because, with the apartments, we were spending tons of money, on CapEx trying to, fix this, replacing stairs, decks, and everything. And I love not having that massive outlay. Periodically, we might have to do some utility work. And I kind of fell in love with it at that point. Around the same time, we bought a smaller property down the street, so we kind of integrated that into our portfolio. And it was really nice because everything was within about a 15-20 minute time span of itself, and it was running really easy. I had the manager taking care of everything. So it was later that year that I found another turnaround project in the Dallas area, which I think it was 5 or 6 hours away from our existing properties, but it was big enough to kind of, the deal made sense.
Right.
So I got that one under contract, and at the same time, we kind of had some family stuff going on. So we ended up moving back to Illinois, and I thought, man, this is going to be terrible. How can I successfully do this turnaround project if I'm not there? So I ended up reaching out to an investor group of mobile home parks that I had, talked with casually before, and they were interested in the property. They had something else in the area, and I ended up assigning the contract to them, which they paid us a referral fee for it. And
you wholesaled the deal, right?
Yeah, I don't know I know that there's some, technical specifics with everything. I don't know versus like an assignment or wholesale, but essentially, yeah, we had a contract. Our intention was to purchase it initially. We had, put up some type of earnest money, and somebody came in and took our place on the contract and ended up closing it. So,
contract.
But
okay.
yeah, I guess wholesale.
That's contract. No, you said it right. I think I put the general term on it, but yeah, contract assignment. Which, are you comfortable maybe talking about the specifics of those numbers on how, the earnest money amount, the purchase price, and then what you wholesaled it for? Is that a story for another day? Maybe?
Sure. That's so this property we had under contract for, I think it was like $550,000.
And how many mobile home park?
So this park was 70 spaces, and there was 38 or 39 occupied lots. Everyone owned their own home. It was city utilities. I think the property lot rent at the time was around $250.
Okay.
So realistically, the property was we had a contract on it for maybe $50,000 or $100,000 less than market value. It did need a little bit of work with the road repairs. Plus, when you get into that distress territory where it's 39 out of 70 spaces,
sure.
It's not a stabilized asset. So no one's going to lend on it. It has to be a cash deal.
Okay.
That was kind of the other thing, which I thought, I'm always under the presumption that if I find the right deal, I can, either get together investors or whatever to make it happen. But this was more of, I just didn't feel comfortable not being there for getting the homes.
So your plan before, again, I'm just going to keep bouncing in questions as they kind of roll through my head here. Your initial plan before it ended up as a contract assignment was to take those 30 you got 38 or 39 occupied lot spaces with mobile homes on them. The owners in the park, or the tenants in the park, own the homes and are renting the land from you, which is, I know, the structure that you prefer as far as mobile home parks go. And your plan was to move in additional, to fill in those, 31 or so extra homes to fill the full 70 spaces?
Yes. Ideally, that's what you would do. And then that's kind of one of the big challenges with the business is how do you get those lots filled? Because, 20 years ago, people would, be looking for places to move in, but it's a different, business now. So you can either buy a used home, bring it in, probably rehab it somewhat and then get it rented or at least to own option where the people are going to own it. The problem is that you have a high risk or a high level of default where people might, stay there for a couple of years.
Right.
And maybe they'll leave.
Not exercise
one of the things that one of the things that we've done is with dealers, we've tried to incentivize dealers where we pay them, say we'll pay for your customers' transport costs, all the utility hookups, a basic, front stairs and deck. When it's all said and done, it could end up costing us $4,000 or $5,000. But then we get a home in there, the person's going to own their own home. They may have a mortgage on it, not through us. And then we're just having them pay us lot rent.
Right.
So I like that one a lot. It's, you have a cash outlay up front, but if they stay there, you can recoup your funds relatively quickly,
sure,
depending on what your lot rent is.
Right.
It's a lot of work, and that's, when I look at deals, if it's a vacant pad, you essentially give it a value of 0 because to get that home in there, it's a lot of work.
Okay.
But that's kind of what, we were looking to do on that. And the assignment fee on that was $45,000, which, relatively speaking, was still a good deal for the end purchaser because they had still purchased a property that, had upside below, slightly below market rents at the time. And the nice thing was a year later, I drove by the property and I had seen that they had put in all brand new homes on the rest of it. We're working to get it, fully leased and occupied. And it was in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex is one of the hottest,
sure,
kind of areas in the country. And so adding affordable housing when people can get a house payment of, say, $250, $300 and their lot rents, $250, $300 for an all-in housing cost of $600 when your, next cheapest option is a 2 or 3 bedroom apartment that rents out for $1,000. That's why I love the business model. It's based on affordable housing. You offer a product that nobody else can. It just has to, it's better when you're in a better market. So in weak markets, it's kind of a different business.
No, I think it's awesome. I love it. Like I said, this is kind of my first forte in learning more about mobile home park investing. I did a little dabbling myself back years ago on some parks, but I never pulled the trigger on anything. But hearing your side of it and talk about, the aspect of affordable housing and how the parks can be opportunities for not only an investor but also a homeowner. I mean, it's kind of like the best of both worlds, which is awesome.
Yeah. And
as you've been talking, I wrote down a ton of questions. I don't know if you want to get into them now, but it started from the beginning of the podcast, and they don't have to be long answers. I'm just curious myself.
Sure.
You mentioned the initial deal that you were – well, first of all, what did your parents think when you were living at home and you're looking at buying a mobile home park or an apartment building in – was it, you said Oklahoma. Was that an apartment building or was that a mobile home park?
Yeah, that was an apartment building.
And it fell apart. Did your parents have any input?
God bless my mom. She was my initial partner. She was supportive 100%, and I don't know if things would have panned out if I didn't have her blessing. But so I guess I was putting in all this, the sweat equity, and she was kind of my finance backer on it. So
absolutely, no, that's awesome. And what you said you did, like $6,000 to $7,000 worth of due diligence, and you ended up losing money and kind of, when it all fell apart. What was that due diligence?
So I learned a lot since then. So I started off doing a survey, phase 1, a property inspection, and between legal fees, I enlisted an attorney early on. So once we kind of went into it all, I wasn't really comfortable because it was a primarily vacant complex, and I knew we were going to have a lot of issues with mold and how extensive the work was. I think the numbers still would have made sense on it. I think it was probably just too large of a project to take on. I've since switched my focus where you try and anything that's a deal breaker, you try and get those things out of the way on the front end before you're spending any money. So that way, you're not losing that money. You still, it's one of the risks. Once you get in, you sometimes have to, pay to play, but you try and minimize that risk.
Absolutely. And I think there's something we need to just elaborate on a touch more with what you said, which was you talked about obtaining a survey, which when you're dealing with an apartment complex can be substantially higher than what you'd see on like a single family home survey, which would be, a couple $100. You said phase one, and for the listeners that aren't aware, phase one he's talking about a phase one environmental, where they're essentially evaluating the grounds that the property is built on to determine whether it has any potential risk tied to it from any environmental factor. Is that an adequate statement?
Yeah, it's one of the most important things. You can never overlook that. So.
Right, because that could be like a gas station too close to the property with a leaking tank or whatever. Right? Is that you think that's accurate?
Yep,
okay,
that's right. And then especially if you're like on a well or something and the groundwater is contaminated, and there's just, you can potentially buy a property which you think is a home run and then end up losing millions on it if it's the wrong one. So it's very improbable, but it's insurance that you can't pass on to get that
Absolutely.
Get that report.
That opportunity went away, and you kept on moving forward with new opportunities, which I think is great. I mean, because you're kind of unique as an investor, in my opinion, where you went out of your normal scope of comfort level, right? You're from Illinois, you grew up in the area, and then you're jumping into Oklahoma. You're looking at, you end up buying these condos. Sounds like you ended up with 46 condo units in, is that Houston, right?
Right, yeah, it was a submarket of Houston. Yep.
Okay, sure. And I mean, that's incredible, because how many investors out there that are just getting started? It sounds like you're in your 20s at the time, or still are. I don't even know, how old are you, Jack?
31 now. So
okay.
At the time, I think I was 22 when I closed.
Wow, that is incredible. So amen to that. You can get started at any age, I think is great. That's very inspirational. And one of the things that I wanted to ask, and then I'll kind of let you carry on with your story, is you mentioned the lease option factor when you're dealing with mobile home parks. How does the new Dodd-Frank rules play into what your business model is, or do they? I know you prefer to own only the land, but it sounds like you've had some experience on both sides of it, right?
Yeah. So initially, what we did is when we started bringing in homes, we have this what's called a rec credit system that we've adopted from, larger operators that have kind of used the same thing, where it's still questionable if it's the a good answer to it, but it kind of skirts you from going into the Dodd-Frank stuff. So it's essentially, if you make your payment of say $500 a month, let's just say $250 lot rent, $250 home rent, that half of your home rent portion goes to the actual home. So then after, you have a predetermined purchase price. After 3 years, if you make your payments on time, you essentially own that home if you would like to, or 4 or 5 years. So, we've done that on a couple homes. We've had some success, and then we've had some where people, trash the place after a year, and then we're back at point A, which, we have to spend several $1,000s to get the home back operational, and because people just seem to kind of, not take care of it. And the thing that, I had another local investor help me out who is a licensed mortgage guy. He actually helped me with getting some of the homes rehabbed, and we set up a structure where he would take care of the rehab and get the home sold, vet the end purchaser, and he would originate a note that we would take back on. And I know he had looked at the compliance more in depth than we did, so we kind of just funded those, and we ended up with our own mortgage and paid him a fee for doing it.
Sure. Which is the right way to do it if you're going to be doing any type of finance structure without a bank, right? Like seller finance type transaction. You've got a residential mortgage loan officer or originator in the deal that's vetting out the potential buyers and making sure that they can actually afford the property that you're selling them, and then you're in compliance with Dodd-Frank, which was my original question, which is great. And for those who aren't aware what Dodd-Frank is, that is the laws that were enacted back in, 2012 maybe, 11, I'm not even sure the year, but it was basically to protect the end consumer from any type of predatory lending on the seller finance side. And there's a lot more that goes into the 14,000 page document that our lovely government has come up with. But the nuts and bolts of it for the investor side is it put restrictions on what an investor can do on the seller finance world. So if anyone has any more questions on, what that means, you'd have to consult with an attorney, honestly, because I'm not 100% sure. But my understanding is each investor can seller finance a handful of properties per year without a residential mortgage lender tied to it, which is essentially somebody that's going to evaluate the buyer on your behalf, and you're going to pay a fee to do that. I believe it's 3. I heard as high as 6 actually at our meetup last week, but my understanding was you get like 3 freebies per year, and anything beyond that is you have to comply with mortgage lending standards in that state. We digress a little bit. You also mentioned the word dealer. You said you were incentivizing dealers by offering, paying for the cost of moving the mobile home and putting in the stairs and the utility hookups and all that. What's a dealer? I don't even know what that means.
So that would be like, I guess we don't have, I'm trying to think around here, it's kind of a different climate where down there you drive along the highway and you have, your Clayton mobile homes on the side of the road and several different manufacturers. There's some independent dealers. So I guess pretty much like a car dealership.
Right. No, I'm getting it now. That's what I thought it was, but I wasn't sure, so I figured I would ask. Well, that's awesome. Yeah. And you've also said the term turnaround project a few times, and I assume that means you're getting into to a distressed opportunity that, like you said, you had that park that you wholesale was basically just over 50% occupied with homes on it, and you're turning it around and making it a fully functional pro forma situation where you've got all the spaces filled. Correct?
Right.
Okay.
Right. And
cool.
That's what the upside is. If you have the time, energy, and effort to do those, they can definitely be worthwhile.
Absolutely. All right, let's continue on with the story because I know you've got more. So we left off with you wholesaling that deal in that Dallas-Fort Worth area. What else have you done?
So then I started kind of looking at, it all seemed to kind of come back to the deal. If you were able to find the deal, you kind of had, a lot more options. Now that I kind of discovered this new avenue of, even if it doesn't make sense for you, maybe it makes sense for somebody else. I started spending a little bit of time and money and trying to develop our kind of our database on trying to kind of find those properties and pinpointing certain markets, certain size properties. So I enlisted the help of somebody who's still with me to this day, part time. On I kind of told her everything I wanted to do, and she just kind of created a program. We use Microsoft Access. I still don't even really know how to use it, but she just kind of saw what I was doing with Excel spreadsheets and how pitiful it was, and she said, "You really need to do this." And so I kind of listened to her, and that really just helped out a lot because I'm not very, I don't really understand how it works, but I just say, hey, we need to, send mail out to these people here, and there, and she just kind of gets me a list and trying to keep that updated regularly.
I think Access is like the mail side component of Excel, right? Where it's like a database. It's like a databasing platform through Microsoft.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about it either. I just know that much.
And I originally started going to like List Source, those guys, and trying to pull that stuff. And after my first mailing, I just realized that maybe this stuff works with single family, but mobile home parks are just kind of, weird, I guess, where everyone kind of codes them differently. So that's one of the big value plays is trying to develop that database because it's not something that's, available anywhere. It's all going to be legwork that you're going to have to put in there. And we're still updating it to this day where there's certain areas we want to get to. We just can't get the right information. So we're still working on it because we have, maybe about 6 states we're aggressively trying to pursue. And parks are changing hands all the time. So trying to keep up with that is a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah, well, I mean, where does somebody even get access to that side of it? I mean, for those who don't know, ListSource is essentially an aggregator of homes that are owned by certain types of owners. So that's where a lot of wholesalers are sending, or any investor sending direct mail to an owner. It might be an out-of-state landlord. It might be some type of vacant house or high equity list. There's multiple options you can pull on ListSource for my understanding, the single family side, but where does one gather information just for mobile home parks?
It's trying to, I guess there's some public information out there. There's some websites that have some parks, but kind of everything that I've always found, there's been some properties that weren't included on it. And kind of one of the things with direct mail is that guy who's not getting contacted, could potentially be a great deal because some of these people we talk to just get bombarded with, with letters and everything. So, either trying to go through public records data or, trying to compile some of that, information from different websites on where the properties are. I don't know there is no all, be all end all. It's kind of been a few different things that we've done. And even still, we'll find a property. Hey, where the heck is this? Where's this property on our list? How do we overlook it? So, kind of one of the valuable things to set up is your list if you're trying to target a certain area.
Right. Okay.
So, and once we kind of started growing that database, I thought, well, I'd rather just try and find these deals and, either we'll try and buy them or, somebody else might be interested in buying them. And that was kind of, so that was about 2 years ago. And I guess the story's kind of same for the last 2 years, has just been trying to find deals. And a lot of direct mail marketing, and we even set up a cold caller for a little while, and we ended up doing a handful of assignments. And then we also had a couple of deals we found which we really liked, and we invested money in, and we have somebody else that's operating them right now. So those partnerships were successful. I think we even had one where it ended up being just like a quick flip where we had closed on it, and our partner on that one and then ended up selling it a few months later for a little bit more money. So that was kind of fun.
Right.
With single family homes, I think it's a little more straightforward, or I guess even apartment complex. Mobile home parks, there's a lot of landmines and booby traps in the property. So, one of the biggest things is zoning, making sure that the park is operating legally. If a home leaves the property, will you be able to bring one back in? There's a lot of deals that I would say, I don't know what the ratio is. I guess at least half of them fall apart because of a significant material defect on the property, either with a zoning or some type of utility issue.
Sure.
There's just all sorts of things that can go wrong with them. And that's kind of, mobile home parks are great with the caveat if you buy the right property. So that's, seeing all these kind of bad deals that we had to pass on or had some type of, deal breaker on them was probably just as valuable doing all that learning as was any assignment fees that we had generated on any of those deals, because I guess I was a little more actively involved on those, where we had kind of, tried to go out to all the properties and, try and obtain whatever documents we needed to on the property, profit loss statements and whatnot. So, and that's, a lot of different deals, a lot of different properties, and just kind of going to a handful of states and checking them out was a lot of fun. So,
would you say you're kind of operating in a handful, or have you done stuff nationwide?
What have we done? So Texas, Iowa, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Illinois, Iowa, Indiana.
Okay.
So since I'm in Illinois, I really started trying to put a focus on a lot of stuff around here. There was a while when I was starting to branch out to a handful of other states, and I'll look at a deal pretty much anywhere. Kind of as you get farther, though, I'd like the park to be a little bit bigger. Mm-hmm. I had a park under contract in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. I thought, man, that would be wonderful that I can, go on family trips and check up on the property. But, that one ended up, having a guy owning, 20% of the homes that wasn't disclosed on the front end. It was kind of in rough shape. And so there's some risk with those things, and they wouldn't, go with one of the concessions we asked for. So we ended up passing on it. But,
okay. I mean, how many deals have you done, would you say? It sounds like quite a few.
So over the last couple of years, just in those parks between the assignments, I would say it was probably around 11 with
Nice.
either the partnerships. And we also ended up buying a property for ourselves. And the reason I wanted to mention the townhouse at the front of it. So
okay.
We ended up, we sold that townhouse this year. And the nice thing was, since we had lived there for 2 years, 2 of the last 5 years, we were able to sell it, and the gains from that would be tax free.
Right.
So I ended up rolling those proceeds for the down payment for our next our mobile home park that we bought, and that's kind of the one that I'm working on right now. We bought it about 6 months ago, and it's 28 spaces, and just trying to get everything up and running. It's a pretty stabilized park for the most part. It does have some problems that we are working on addressing, and just kind of getting it so it runs as a well-oiled machine.
Absolutely.
a couple months ago, we actually, that first property I told you about, the condo complex, we ended up selling that. Just felt like the market had, the rent growth in a lot of Texas markets has been tremendous over the last few years. Everyone has kind of been moving there, and it's just really been reflected in the real estate prices. I thought it was a good time to take some chips off the table, and we're, with those proceeds now, we're trying to find more mobile home parks. So that's kind of brings me where I'm at today, is just trying to find mobile home parks to buy. So that's just kind of the same thing for the last couple of years. I wish I could have taken advantage of some of those opportunities that we had assigned, but our capital was a little more limited at that time. So.
Sure. But now you've got an opportunity. You've got more capital based on these recent sales. You've already got it. Where'd you find that park, that 28 space park, and that's in Illinois? That's a more local park?
Yep.
How'd you find that one? Is that direct mail?
That was direct mail, yep.
Awesome.
And it was actually a funny story because I didn't know why that, the guy had, you always kind of wonder, why you, or why did they call your letter that day? And he told me at the closing table, he said that he was up on one of the electrical poles making a repair when it was, I think, sub-freezing weather or something crazy like we have here in Illinois. And he said, "Where's that goddamn letter the guy sent me the other day? I'm going to call him." So it was just, hitting him at the right time. And I guess kind of going into one additional story from the last couple of years on one of the smaller assignments we did.
Sure.
We had cold called some people out, and somebody had called on our mailer, and I looked, and 2 months ago we had talked to the gentleman, and he wanted $300,000 for his property, and he was calling now, and we ended up getting it under contract for about half that price. So now the numbers made sense. And the reason was because he had a massive water leak that month, and just trying to get the plumber to take care of it. He just got fed up with it. So it seems to be luck of the draw sometimes with deals. Just being getting the mail piece to them at the right time.
Absolutely. He was a tired landlord. It sounded like, huh? Just tired of dealing with it.
I'm sure I'll be one of those one day, but hopefully a few decade run in me. But then I'll call some young whippersnapper and tell him I want to sell them properties. So
absolutely, that's the way this business works. What would you say was the best deal you've done?
I'm I guess we've had some good assignment fees, but the best deals that I've ever done are the ones pretty much, I guess, anything that I've owned. Just because ownership is just such a wonderful thing in real estate, because of all the benefits that there are with having your mortgage paid down by tenants, and tax benefits, and increasing rent, and as long as you can keep your expenses stabilized, it's such a wonderful business that any assignment fee is almost always short-sighted. I feel like, because to actually own a good property, and the wholesaling thing, it's a job, and I kind of do it as I guess I had done it as a byproduct for trying to find those right opportunities for myself. I'm a very conservative investor. Investing terrifies me, so I really just try and find that deal where everything, if it goes wrong, I'll still be okay.
Right.
The margin of safety concept by Ben Graham and Warren Buffett. I really kind of stay true to that. If the market declines, will you still be okay?
Absolutely.
But any of those deals where I actually owned or am currently owning them. Because, if you own something, I talk to a lot of people who own the same property for 50 years, and they can't imagine selling it because it's so profitable every year.
Right.
That's why it's hard to get people to part with their mobile home parks, because it's a great business.
Absolutely. No, I think that's a great point you just brought up. I mean, inspirational words on many levels. Yeah, owning the properties. Wholesaling makes you money right now, but it doesn't keep you floating, a year from now necessarily, and it is a job. So the fact that you've built up a portfolio of these mobile home parks, and you're a full-time investor, which I think is awesome, especially being at such a young age of 31. I mean, that's incredible. And I think that leads me to my next question, which is, what's your recommendation for somebody who's interested in getting started in either mobile home park investing or maybe just real estate investing in general?
So there's a handful of great resources specific to mobile home parks. The one that I'm a big advocate of is Frank and Dave. They're one of the largest portfolio operators. I think they're like number 5 on the list of largest mobile home park owners. They offer a boot camp, and they also have like a quick, how to buy a park manual, which is actually what I did when I had my first park under contract. I kind of follow their process and methodology step by step. Pretty much gives you every basic resource. I think it's $1,000 for the book, and it's just one of the most valuable things for being a mobile home park investor.
Okay.
Generally speaking, for any real estate investor, one of the things that I did is, like I said, on the assignments is I had a chance to work with somebody who knew more about something than I did. So I took everything as kind of a learning step, or trying to see, hey, should I go check out the property, which might mean you have to go drive for a couple of days, and then kind of going in there and just seeing all these mobile home parks, and you really start to get that gut feel for things. When you walk into a park, you can kind of figure out what's wrong with it and what to look for. So I would have done a good chunk of that for free. I guess if I was earlier on, I kind of had started gaining some experience. But so shadowing, or if you have a successful real estate investor that you might see at your club, maybe ask them, is there something that I can help you with? And I think that's one of the best things, because that they're out there doing things, they're successful, and they're people like myself get bored and just kind of ramble on about stuff, and you can pick up stuff from
right.
them. So I really I think that's a great resource. So.
No, you made an excellent point, and that is something we just talked about on a podcast recently. I don't remember which one, but that shadowing aspect, I think, is huge for investors that are just trying to get started. Viewing properties, I'm constantly pushing any investor, even the ones that are active and have done deals through me or have come to me after doing deals, however I'm related to them, I'm always pushing them to come look at property that either I'm involved in or another investor is involved in if I have access to it, or perhaps even just MLS type stuff, or opportunities that arise. And it's not always because I'm trying to sell them a house. It's really because I want them to be exposed to the different aspects of what goes into these properties, whether it be for rental or as a flip type situation, or like you said with a mobile home park. You get a feel for what's going on, and once you see things repetitively, you can start pinpointing issues or concerns that you would have otherwise maybe not even noticed. No, man, that is an awesome point, and I think that's probably one of the best answers we've had to that question on the podcast. That is absolutely 100% true. So, hey, Jack, what would you say is you got any books that you are actively reading? Take that Frank and Dave. Frank and Dave is the name of that mobile home park boot camp / manual.
Yeah,
right?
I think it's the Mobile Home University. I don't know what it's called, but if you search Frank and Dave Mobile Home Park, it'll pull up. They have a free internet forum where I actually ended up posting some questions when I was getting started, trying to figure out if deals were good. Frank chimes in, this is a good deal, or make sure you check on this.
Oh, cool.
I know that there's a lot of books that everyone reads with like Rich Dad Poor Dad, and
sure.
I read a lot of the Dave Lindahl books, but I think that was like 7 or 8 years ago when I was kind of looking at stuff. And then over, I guess, the past few months, I've kind of been big on biographies, like the Warren Buffett Snowball. That's been a great book.
Awesome.
And he's a value investor, and that's kind of what I like to think of myself as, is just trying to find things that have upside and they're mispriced, and that there's room to improve on. So
absolutely. So yeah, that's Snowball. That's the biography of Warren Buffett. I think that's definitely a top seller. I have not read that book yet, but that's something I definitely need to get in my personal library. Well, again, I really appreciate the time you've taken today, Jack. This has been awesome to see your perspective on investing and hearing about your experiences with mobile home parks and wholesaling. What's the best way, if you're willing to, what's the best way that maybe the audience can reach out to you if they have any questions or just want to grab a cup of coffee?
My email is Jack, Jack, at Marvel Equity, MarvelEquity.com. I also have a website, marvelequity.com. That's usually the easiest way. I guess I'm kind of local. I live in Lakemore. It's the McHenry area.
Sure,
Chicago
area, right?
Right. And
Jack at marvelequity.com, and marvelequity.com is the website. Those are the two preferred ways to get a hold of you. Jack, thank you very much for taking the time out today to be on the podcast. It really was an excellent recording, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again and having some more conversation about this stuff and hitting you up at the next meetup.
And you guys are doing that. You guys have the investors group tomorrow, right?
Yeah, we're having our meetup tomorrow night. That'll be November 29th for the listener, so it'll be past. This podcast won't be released until the first week of December, but November 29th, which is tomorrow night at Westwood in Schaumburg at 6 p.m. We're doing an asset protection-based meetup. We've got attorney Chris Emerald, who is going to be speaking on behalf of asset protection and estate planning and things like that. So, yeah, if you're interested, man, I'd love to see you there.
Okay, great. And thanks again for doing all the meetups. I've really been enjoying going to them.
You're absolutely welcome.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Investor Empowerment Series radio show. Be sure to tune in next week for another empowering episode. We welcome your feedback, so please rate us on iTunes and Stitcher, and visit us at www.investorempowermentchicago.com or TANISGroupRealty.com.